Good morning, my name is Sue Beckingham and I'm from Hallam University. In this talk I'm going to share some examples of where I've worked in partnership with students on co-created initiatives that have enabled us to explore the use of social media for learning and teaching. First of all, I want to consider what kinds of student learning experiences that are available outside of teaching and learning. So typically we might talk about co-curricular versus extracurricular activities, and generally speaking the co-curricular are aligned with the formal learning experience, whilst the extracurricular are things that happen outside of academic learning. So for example, extracurricular might be aligned with the student union, so things like sports, societies, volunteering and mentoring. There may be paid roles, so you may have in your university PAL schemes where students mentor students in the years below them, or digital champions that help staff and students get to know technology better, or student ambassadors that might be involved in all sorts of different activities including open days. The co-curricular, as I say, tends to align with the academic module or course, so that might include visits to organisations, attendance at talks with guest speakers, presenting at conferences, that kind of thing. So just focusing in on some research done by Bovell et al. They looked at the different kinds of roles that were adopted in the co-creation of learning and teaching. So they came up with these 4 categories: the co-researcher, the consultant, the pedagogical co-designer and the representative. So the consultants would look at discussing valuable perspectives on learning and teaching. The co-researcher would also take that a step further and engage in research, or it could be subject-based research, and the pedagogical co-designer is actually designing new ways for learning and teaching in that module or course. The representative stands a little bit outside of that, and it's a student voice, so they might be part of committees within the schools, faculties, or indeed the university. A useful piece to look at is on the Advanced HE website, created in 2015, and this looks at student partnerships, and they divide this into learning, designing, developing and researching and inquiring. So if you're interested in that, the references are at the end, so you can find out a bit more in depth about the background and theory to student partnerships that's being put together. So what I'm going to do now is to share some personal case studies with you. And the context is, as I mentioned at the beginning, looking at the impact of social media. That got me really interested, and I wondered how we could progress that and use that with our students. As you may be aware, the use of social media has grown, continues to grow, and the amount of data that students are involved in sharing, and well, everybody, not just students, is quite phenomenal. So together with Alison Purvis and Helen Roger at Sheffield Hallam, we put together some guides on how to use social media responsibly, managing your digital footprint and using social media for learning for staff to use with students. So you can access these short leaflets at go.shu.ac.uk/social media, and I've used these in the classroom to stimulate discussions about using social media responsibly, which starts the conversation. And then I had the opportunity to develop my own blog further, and this is called socialmediaforlearning.com, and here I share tips on using social media for both staff or students that would want to read the blog. The first case study I want to talk about aligns with the leaflets. So this was with a colleague teaching students that were taking an animation course and working with their module leader. So Oksana wanted to kind of link theory and creative practice and give the students some experience working with a client. So I became their client, and the brief that I gave them was to create a 2-minute visual artifact. So that could be an animation or a film that portrayed the importance of using social media responsibly. So to precede that, I led a whole class seminar and talked about all of those things and the value of developing a professional online presence. So the next stage then was aligned to their module, so it was part of the learning experience. The students had a week to prepare in pairs to pitch ideas to me the following week, and they got some feedback. They had some more time to actually develop a visual artifact. The second part was actually optional, so this was an opportunity for the students that wanted to develop their work further, so the artifacts that they'd started to create. And then with a panel and myself, we gave feedback and we actually shortlisted 4 winning projects. The students then were given the opportunity to polish those up, and they presented that work at the Learning and Teaching Conference at Sheffield Hallam. So this was short-lived, but it was a really nice experience for the students. And you can see here some of the quotes. It not only helped them with time management, but it made them feel more confident about talking about their work, showcasing their work in front of audiences. So that was a useful experience. The second one I want to talk about is Smash, and this is a co-led experience, so this is slightly different and kind of the theme of what I wanted to get to in this talk. So these are some students that I worked together with as partners project, and they developed the name for this, what I call a special interest group, SMASH, the acronym, which stands for Social Media for Academic Studies at Hallam. So the focus of this group was to look at the affordances of social media and digital tools, and look at that from the perspective of how they could be used in and out of the classroom as a means for students collaborating and organising their learning, to support their learning, and also to showcase the learning, which is a really important part of it. This has been going for 4 years. The founding members, they helped us to look at the first 3 pillars and the focus of the research that we wanted to do. So we decided where that wanted to go, and then the team expanded. As students either graduated, went on placement, new students joined the group. It's kind of evolved over time, and each year the students have created a variety of different resources that have been useful for both staff and students. So we've led workshops where we've used a series of cards. The students have written blog posts, and they've also presented at conferences externally to Sheffield Hallam. So we developed the initial 3 pillars, which was learning activities, organising learning and showcasing learning, and then recently we've added the student support, which kind of provides us a focus of what we want to look at as part of this group. So the students created, as I say, a variety of different artifacts. So they've created a card set. The first one is the 7 things you can use with social media. So they created lots of different cards and activities that could be used with those particular social media tools, and then looked at the reverse social media, which essentially is pedagogy first. They've looked at what do we want to achieve and how can social media help us. And as I say, they've created blog posts as well. The workshops were really useful because not only did we get the staff perspective, learning from the students within this group, but we also invited other students in their peer group. So it was interesting to hear what they thought would be useful to help them in their learning and teaching, and that's a real eye-opener, and I think it's really good to have that perspective in the student voice. So this is one of the most recent posts, which was actually written in March in response to COVID. The students put together a student toolkit that they thought would help the students. So they told them about the different tools that could help them continue their learning remotely. And what was quite astonishing was the impact here. The blog post has had over 11,000 views internationally. So that was quite motivating for the group of students. And they then went on to write a second blog post, which was a remote learning guide, which also provided tips on support and fun activities that could help them. And that also had a good number of views. I think it was a total of 3,000, over 3,000 in the end. So the outcomes from the students' perspective, they developed some skills being part of this virtual community of practice, and they presented, as I mentioned, at various conferences, the University of Winchester, Edgehill, and the Beck Conference in London, and they reflected on the skills that they've actually developed, and as part of that, we co-published a journal article. Which was a great achievement for them. And there's now a dedicated space to share what they've achieved and the resources that have a Creative Commons license on the Social Media for Learning website, the blog that I created. So some of the things that they developed here, it was a companionship and teamwork. They were students that didn't necessarily know each other at first because they were from different year groups, and they developed some really useful skills. And because I worked with them, I was able to give them a LinkedIn recommendation, which they really appreciated. And finally, these are a few comments that they've made, the things that they've developed. So, it's allowed them to continue to participate in this group remotely because the students went on placement. They've learnt from each other about new tools, and they've developed confidence really to talk about the things that they've learnt with each other, with other people, which was great to see. So just finally in here, and I'll share the slides through SlideShare, there's some links to Students as Partners networks that might be of interest, RAISE and the Change Agents network. There's also some Students as Partners journals that you might be interested in if you're wanting to look at publishing research in the future. And there's the references related to this talk. I hope you felt that was interesting, and if you want to get in touch, I'm on Twitter at SueBex if you've got any further questions. Thanks for listening.